influenced by these doctrines and finding slavery unprofitable as the tobacco soil wore out, freed their slaves and set them up in the world. Thus briefly has been summarized the progress which marked the first phase of the Negro's life in America. The jungle had been left behind and Western ways had been assimilated to a limited extent. But outstanding social, economic or cultural progress was the mark of the exceptional few rather than of the many. The great mass lived a primitive life of work with their leisure spent in an irresponsible and careless search for simple amusement or rest. As the 18th century waned, the bonds seemed to be loosening and a large proportion of the liberties so essential to progress seemed to be destined for the Negro. About the beginning of the 19th century, however, new factors entered into the situation. The cotton gin was invented, there occurred the San Domingan Revolution and the slave trade was abolished. The first of these produced a revolution in southern agriculture, which, with the fact that the slave trade was soon to be abolished, caused the value and demand for Negroes as labor to increase decidedly. The cotton gin now made cotton culture profitable and the area devoted to it was rapidly expanded. This expansion called for more slaves. The section in the Upper South where slavery had not been very profitable and where the Jeffersonians had flourished now forgot their doctrines and turned to raising slaves for southern markets. Manumission became less common, Negroes were more closely in the bonds of slavery than ever. Along with the change of economic value of slaves came a new social condition. The Negro revolt in San Domingan during the 1790s caused great hardship to the whites on that island and many fled to southern ports for safety. There they related their horrible adventures with no suppression of detail and many a southern planter began to think of the horrors of a slave uprising, for the next 60 years that was to be a dread more or less constant and common among slave owners. So stricter watch must be kept, closer control exercised. These events, therefore, made serious inroads upon the slave's progress toward liberty and restricted his advance. The very difficulty of the situation, however, was a stimulus and an aid for Negro enterprise. The desire to escape became greater and many people, heretofore not particularly interested, began to consider the Negro problem. About 1830 there was a crystallization of action and opinion. A Negro, Nat Turner, attempted to organize a slave rebellion and William Lloyd Garrison started a vigorous abolitionist campaign. These events stimulated Southern fears, Northern distaste and Negro enterprise. The Underground Railway, an organization by which fleeing Negroes were hidden and guided on their way to northern communities, became widespread. In this enterprise Negroes themselves played an important part. Enterprising individuals like Josiah Henson, Harriet Tubman, and many others acted as conductors in this means of escape and guided hundreds to liberty. The number of free Negroes grew by this means, increasing from 59,557 in 1790 to 488,070 in 1860, when they comprised 11% of the Negro population. While the slaves themselves had less opportunity to advance, the free Negroes were making what they could of their opportunity. In fact, it was among the free Negroes that the most progress was made in this period.